I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story from. I want to know how far it's traveled. Mom, we think it's time you move to a nursing home. You're becoming a burden. Those words came out of my eldest son Marcus's mouth as I stood in my own kitchen, wearing the apron he gave me for Mother's Day just 3 months earlier. I was 70 years old, Helena Morrison, and I had just finished making Sunday dinner for my 3 ungrateful children, who were now sitting at MY dining table, discussing my fate like I was already dead. But here's the thing nobody knew yet. I wasn't dying fast enough for their liking. What I discovered that day would shatter everything I believed about family, love, and trust. My own children, the babies I'd nursed, raised, and sacrificed everything for, were literally planning to kill me. I know it sounds impossible. How could a mother's love be so betrayed? How could the people you die for be the ones plotting your death? But stick with me, because this story gets so much worse before it gets better. And the way I got my revenge? Well, let's just say they never saw it coming. Standing there that afternoon, with the smell of my famous pot roast filling the air and family photos smiling down from every wall, I felt my world tilt. My daughter Sarah, 45, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Mom, you know we love you, but that fall you had last month really scared us. What fall? I asked, genuinely confused. I hadn't fallen. I'd never been more steady on my feet. My youngest, David, 38, couldn't meet my eyes. The one where you hit your head. Don't you remember? You called me all confused, saying weird things. I stared at him. I had never called him confused about anything. I had perfect recall. Always had, but they were all nodding. These children I'd worked 3 jobs to put through college, looking at me with what I now realized was rehearsed concern. We've already looked at Sunny Meadows, Marcus continued, pulling out a brochure. It's only $8,000 a month. Your house should cover the first few years, and then we can figure out the rest. My house, the Victorian mansion I'd bought with my late husband Thomas 35 years ago. The house I'd lovingly restored with my own hands, worth $2.3 million in today's market. The house that held every Christmas morning, every birthday party, every milestone of their lives. We've already had it praised, Sarah added quickly. Marcus knows a guy who can get it so fast. That's when I felt it, that cold creep of realization that something was terribly, horribly wrong. Let me tell you how I got here, because you need to understand what kind of mother I was to comprehend the depth of this betrayal. When my husband Thomas died of a heart attack 15 years ago, I was 55 years old with 3 college-educated children who were just starting their careers. Instead of selling our family home and downsizing like everyone suggested, I kept it. I worked as a high school principal by day and cleaned offices at night to pay that mortgage. I wanted my children to always have a place to come home to. I helped Marcus with his down payment for his first house, $75,000. When Sarah's husband left her with 2 young children, I paid for a lawyer and child care for 2 years, another $45,000. When David wanted to start his tech company, guess who gave him the startup money? $120,000 from my retirement savings. Every Christmas, every birthday, every family emergency, I was there with my checkbook and my open arms. When Marcus's wife complained about their kitchen being outdated, I paid for the $30,000 renovation. When Sarah needed a new car after her divorce, I co-signed a loan and made half the payments. When David's business failed, who do you think covered his rent for 8 months? But I was happy to do it. That's what mothers do, right? We sacrifice. We give. We love unconditionally. The house had become our gathering place. Every Sunday, they'd come for dinner with their families. My grandchildren would run through the same hallways their parents had, and I'd cook the same recipes my own mother had taught me. The dining room table that seated 12 was always full of laughter, arguments about politics, and the kind of comfortable chaos that only comes from family. I maintained every inch of that house myself. The garden that Thomas and I had planted together still bloomed every spring. The hardwood floors still gleamed. I'd updated the kitchen 3 times, renovated both bathrooms, and even added a sunroom where I'd sit with my morning coffee and watch the birds at the feeder. At 70, I was sharper than most people half my age. I balanced my own checkbook, managed my investment portfolio, and still drove my car everywhere I needed to go. I volunteered at the library twice a week and led a book club for seniors at the community center. But sitting at that dining table, looking at their faces, I started to notice things I'd been blind to before. The way they exchanged glances when they thought I wasn't looking. How Sarah had been asking more and more questions about my finances lately. The way David had been pushing me to simplify my affairs and consolidate my accounts. And Marcus, my firstborn, the child I've been most proud of, he'd been asking about my will with increasing frequency. Mom, you know it's important to keep these things updated. He'd said just last month, things change, and you want to make sure everything goes smoothly when the time comes. When the time comes. As if my death was just another item on his to-do list. That night, after they left with their fake hugs and promises to look into options, I couldn't sleep. Something was gnawing at me, a feeling I couldn't shake. So I did what any former principal would do. I started investigating. I began with my computer, checking my bank accounts online. Everything looked normal at first glance, but then I started noticing small discrepancies. A $200 withdrawal I didn't remember making. A check that had been cashed that I couldn't account for. When I called the bank the next morning, they told me the withdrawals had been made with my ATM card at locations I'd never been to. But I keep meticulous records. I have a filing system that would make the IRS weep with joy. So I pulled out my statement from the past 6 months and started cross-referencing everything. That's when I found the first real evidence. 3 checks I'd supposedly written to cash. One for $500, one for $750, and one for $1,200. The handwriting looked like mine, but something was off. The H in Helena was slightly different. The loop wasn't quite right. I remember Thomas teaching me about forgery when he worked in banking. Everyone has signature quirks, he'd said. Little habits that are almost impossible to replicate. Mine was the way I dotted my I's, always a tiny circle instead of a quirk left over from my Catholic school days. These signatures had dots, regular dots. I started paying attention to things around the house too, little things that seemed out of place. My spare house key was in a different spot in the kitchen drawer. Papers in my home office had been moved, just slightly, but moved nonetheless. Someone had been in my house when I wasn't here. Then I remembered Sarah asking to borrow my car last month while hers was in the shop. She'd kept it for 3 days and returned it with the tank full and an apology for driving it more than expected. I thought nothing of it at the time, but now I wondered, had she made copies of my keys? The more I dug, the more I found. A credit card had been opened in my name. One I'd never applied for. Small purchases, nothing that would trigger alerts, but enough to establish a pattern of use. When I called to report as fraud, they told me the application had been submitted online using all my correct personal information, including my social security number and mother's maiden name. Information that only family would know. I started keeping a journal, documenting every suspicious thing I noticed. The way David had been asking detailed questions about my health insurance. How Marcus had offered to help me organize my important documents. The way Sarah had suggested I might want to update my power of attorney paperwork. One afternoon, I decided to test my theory. I called each of them and said I wasn't feeling well, that I was dizzy and confused. Within an hour, all 3 were at my house with concerned faces and helpful suggestions about getting checked out. But I watched their eyes. I saw the quick glance Marcus shot at Sarah. The way David's mouth almost curved into a smile before he caught himself. They weren't worried about my health. They were hopeful about it. And you, what would you do in this person's place? I would love to hear your opinion. So please share it with me in the comments. The truth hit me like a freight train on a Tuesday morning in October. I'd hired a private investigator named Jake Riley, a former police detective who specialized in family fraud. I'd told him I suspected financial abuse, but I had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. Jake called me at 7 a.m. His voice was grim. Mrs. Morrison, we need to meet. Today. and you need to bring someone you trust with you. We met at a coffee shop downtown, far from anywhere my children might see us. Jake spread out a folder thick with photographs, bank records, and legal documents. What he showed me made my blood turn to ice. Your children have been planning this for over 2 years, he said quietly. They've been systematically setting up a case that you're suffering from dementia. The photographs showed Marcus meeting with a lawyer who specialized in elder law, Sarah having lunch with someone from Adult Protective Services, David visiting multiple nursing homes and taking detailed notes. But that wasn't the worst part. They've been gradually increasing the dosage of sleep medication in your evening tea, Jake continued, showing me lab results from the dregs he collected from my teacup. Not enough to hurt you seriously, but enough to make you drowsy and occasionally disoriented. That's why you've been feeling foggy some evenings. I thought about all those nights I felt unusually tired after our family dinners. How I'd attributed it to getting older, to the natural process of aging. They'd been drugging me. My own children had been slowly poisoning me to make me appear incompetent. There's more, Jake said, and I honestly didn't think I could take any more. They forged your signature on documents transferring power of attorney to Marcus, effective immediately upon a doctor's declaration of incompetency. They've also had you declared mentally unfit by a doctor who's never examined you, Dr. Gerald Hoffman. He's Sarah's golf partner's husband. The room spun around me. How is that legal? It's not. It's elder abuse and fraud. But they were counting on no one challenging it once you were in the nursing home. Then he showed me the final piece of evidence, a recorded conversation between my 3 children, taken from a bug he'd placed in Marcus's car after following him to several suspicious meetings. Sarah's voice was crystal clear. Once she's in Sunny Meadows, we increase the medication dosage gradually. The place has a reputation for losing residents to natural causes within the first year. Dr. Hoffman already has a death certificate template ready. Complications from dementia, very common for her age. Marcus laughed. Mom always said she'd rather die than go to a nursing home. We're just helping her fulfill her wishes a little sooner than planned. David's voice was the one that broke my heart completely. The house should be ours anyway. She's lived long enough. Time to cash in. I sat there in that coffee shop, surrounded by the evidence of my children's planned murder, and I felt something I'd never experienced before. Pure, cold rage mixed with a determination that surprised me with its intensity. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to make them pay. Jake, I said, my voice steadied and I felt, I need you to help me plan something special for my dear children. Something they'll never forget. His smile was sharp as a blade. Mrs. Morrison, it would be my absolute pleasure. You know what they say about underestimating your opponent? My children thought they were dealing with a confused old woman who'd go quietly into that good night. What they forgot was that I'd spent 30 years as a high school principal, dealing with liars, manipulators, and scheming teenagers who thought they were smarter than me. They had no idea what was coming. Jake and I spent the next month crafting what I now call the education plan, because my children were about to learn some very expensive lessons about respect, family, and the consequences of greed. First, we had to secure my assets. Working with my real attorney, not the fake one they'd try to trick me into using, I moved all my money into new accounts at a different bank. We set up a trust that would be impossible for them to break, even if they somehow got power of attorney. The house was transferred into the trust, along with my investment portfolio worth $800,000 and my life insurance policies, totaling $500,000. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of cutting them out completely, I did something much more clever. I rewrote my will to leave each of them exactly $1, $1 each, with a notation that this was intentional and after careful consideration of their demonstrated love and care for their mother. The bulk of my estate, over $3.5 million total, would be donated to 3 charities. The American Cancer Society, because Thomas died of cancer, not a heart attack like I told them, the National Center on Elder Abuse, and a local charity that provided free legal services to seniors. But the will also included something special, a video message explaining exactly why they were being disinherited, along with copies of all the evidence Jake had gathered. The video would be played at the will reading with their spouses, their children, and several family friends in attendance. Next, we planned my medical emergency. Jake knew a doctor who specialized in geriatric medicine, someone who could credibly examine me and provide documentation of my perfect mental health. We scheduled this for the same day I would spring my trap. I also started wearing a wire. Every Sunday dinner, every phone call, every visit was recorded. I wanted their confessions in their own voices, talking about their plans to drug me, steal from me, and ultimately kill me. The final piece was the most satisfying. I arranged to have their meeting with Dr. Hoffman recorded. Jake had discovered that the good doctor was running an insurance scam, providing fake mental health evaluations for families who wanted to institutionalize elderly relatives for financial gain. We needed him on tape admitting to the fraud. Meanwhile, I played my part perfectly. I continued being the loving mother, making Sunday dinner, listening to their fake concern about my health, and even pretending to be interested in their nursing home brochures. But inside, I was counting down the days until their world would explode. I decided the perfect time would be Thanksgiving. How poetic. A day meant for gratitude, when they'd finally learned what they should have been grateful for all along. Jake, I said during one of our planning sessions, I wanted to understand that every dollar they thought they were going to inherit, every plan they made, every night they slept peacefully thinking about my death, it was all built on lies. They're lies. He nodded approvingly. What about your grandchildren? This is going to devastate them too. I thought about that. My grandchildren were innocent in all this, but they were also old enough, the youngest was 16, to understand what their parents had done. They deserve to know who their parents really are. And maybe, just maybe, this will teach them that love and respect can't be taken for granted. The hardest part was the waiting. Sitting at that dining room table every Sunday, looking at their faces, knowing they were counting down the days until my death. Watching Sarah help herself to second servings while mentally spending my money. Listening to Marcus give me financial advice while he'd been forging my signature. Seeing David play with his children in my backyard while planning to steal their inheritance. But I endured it because I knew that very soon they were going to learn the most important lesson of their lives. Thanksgiving morning dawned crisp and clear. Perfect weather for what I had planned. I'd spent the week before preparing my usual feast. Turkey with all the trimmings, 3 kinds of pie, and my famous stuffing recipe that my grandchildren always requested. But this year, there were some special additions to the menu. I'd invited everyone, not just my 3 children and their families, but also my late husband's brother, Uncle Pete, my neighbor, Mrs. Chun, who'd been like a sister to me for 20 years, and several family friends. I told them I had special news to share and wanted everyone there for the announcement. What my children didn't know was that I'd also invited Dr. Harrison, the geriatrician who'd examined me and declared me in perfect mental health. Jake was positioned outside with camera equipment, and my real lawyer, Elizabeth Crawford, was sitting in her car around the corner with all the legal documents we'd need. The dining room was packed, 23 people around my extended table, with the grandchildren as separate card table I'd set up by the window. Everyone was laughing, sharing stories, complimenting my cooking, just like every Thanksgiving for the past 15 years. Except this time, I stood up before dessert. Everyone, thank you for being here today. I have some important announcements to make. I smiled at my 3 children, who looked mildly interested but not concerned. They probably thought I was going to announce my engagement to someone, or maybe a cruise I was planning. First, I want to share some wonderful news about my health. Dr. Harrison, would you please stand? The distinguished older man rose from his chair, looking professional in his dark suit. Dr. Harrison conducted a comprehensive examination of my mental and physical health last week. Doctor, would you share your findings? Certainly. Mrs. Morrison, at 70 years old, has a cognitive function of someone 20 years younger. Her memory is exceptional. Her decision-making ability is sound, and she shows no signs whatsoever of dementia, confusion, or any mental decline. She's one of the sharpest patients I've ever examined. I watched my children's faces change. Sarah went pale. Marcus's jaw tightened. David looked confused. That's wonderful news, isn't it, children? especially since you've all been so worried about my mental state lately. My voice was honey sweet, but there was steel underneath. Now, for my second announcement. Jake, would you join us, please? Jake entered from the kitchen, professional and imposing in his dark suit. Everyone, this is Jake Riley, a private investigator I hired to look into some irregularities I'd noticed in my financial accounts. The silence was deafening. Marcus started to stand, but Jake's presence made him sit back down. Jake has uncovered something quite fascinating. It seems that someone's been forging my signature, accessing my bank accounts, and even going so far as to have me declared mentally incompetent by a doctor who's never examined me. Jake, would you share what you found? What happened next was beautiful chaos. Jake methodically presented the evidence while I watched my children's faces crumble. The forged checks, the fraudulent credit card, the recorded conversations about increasing my medication and speeding up my death. When Jake played the recording of them laughing about helping me fulfill my wishes of dying rather than go to a nursing home, my grandchildren gasped. My daughter-in-law covered her mouth in horror. Uncle Pete looked like he wanted to strangle someone. There's more, I continued, my voice getting stronger. It seems my loving children have been drugging my evening tea with sleep medication, hoping to make me appear confused and disoriented. They've been planning to murder me, steal my house, and split my assets among themselves. Sarah finally found her voice. Mom, this is insane. We would never. I roared and everyone jumped. 70 years old, and I'd never felt more powerful. Jake, play the recording from Marcus's car last Tuesday. Their own voices filled the room, discussing my impending death with the casual tone most people use to plan a vacation. The aftermath was swift and brutal, exactly as I'd planned. Marcus tried to deny everything, even with his own voice echoing in the room. That recording is fake. She's clearly losing her mind and making up stories. But Jake had more evidence than just audio. He pulled out photographs of Marcus meeting with a corrupt lawyer, Sarah having lunch with Adult Protective Services, David touring nursing homes while taking notes about disposal time frames. My daughter-in-law, Lisa, grabbed her children and headed for the door. We're leaving. Now. She turned back to Marcus. Don't come home until you've figured out how to explain to your children why their grandmother thinks you tried to murder her. Sarah's ex-husband, who'd been invited to maintain normal family traditions for the kids, looked disgusted, and I thought I was the bad guy in this family. He started gathering his children too. Kids, say goodbye to your mother. We need to have a serious talk about custody arrangements. David's wife, Jennifer, just sat there crying. How could you do this to her? She paid for our wedding. She helped us with a house down payment. She's been nothing but generous and loving, and you wanted to kill her. But it was my grandchildren's reactions that broke everyone's hearts. My oldest granddaughter, Marcus's daughter Emma, who was 19, stood up from the card table with tears streaming down her face. Grandma, is this really true? Did my dad really plan to hurt you? I walked over to her and took her hands. Yes, sweetheart. I'm sorry you had to learn this way, but yes, it's true. She looked at her father with disgust. You're dead to me. All of you are dead to me. Then she hugged me fiercely. Grandma, I am so sorry. I love you, and I would never let anyone hurt you. One by one, my grandchildren came to hug me. Even the youngest ones understood that their parents had done something terrible to someone they loved. Dr. Harrison spoke up. I'm required by law to report suspected elder abuse. Mrs. Morrison, with your permission, I'll be filing a report with Adult Protective Services immediately. You have my full permission, Doctor. My real lawyer, Elizabeth, chose that moment to make her entrance. Mrs. Morrison, I have all the documents you requested. She looked around the room at my 3 children. I assume these are the defendants we'll be pressing charges against. Marcus finally exploded. This is insane. You can't prove any of this. We're your children. We love you. I actually laughed. Love? You call planning my murder love? You call stealing from me love? You call drugging my tea love? We never meant to actually hurt you, Sarah said desperately. The medication was just to help you sleep better. Help me sleep better? Or help me appear incompetent so you could steal my house? Jake stepped forward. Actually, Mrs. Morrison, we have more evidence from this week. The bugs I placed in their homes have been quite educational. He pulled out another recording device. This one contained conversations from just 2 days ago. Sarah telling her husband how they needed to speed up the timeline because I was getting suspicious. David discussing with his wife whether they should increase the medication dosage, just to be safe. The room erupted. Uncle Pete stood up, all 6'3" of him, and pointed at my children. You three are no longer welcome in this family. Helena, Thomas would be rolling over in his grave if he knew what his children had become. Mrs. Chun, my sweet neighbor, was crying. Helena, honey, you can stay with us as long as you need to. We won't let them near you. But I stood tall and proud in my own dining room. Thank you, everyone, but I won't be needing protection. Because, as of today, my dear children no longer have any reason to want me dead. I smiled at their confused faces. You see, I've rewritten my will. Each of you will inherit exactly what you deserve. $1 each. 6 months later, I'm sitting in a cafe in Rome, writing this story on my laptop while sipping the most incredible cappuccino of my life. The Italian sun is streaming through the windows, and I'm wearing a dress I bought in Milan last week. Purple with gold accents, colors that make me feel powerful and beautiful. Let me tell you how everything ended, because the justice was so perfectly poetic. The criminal charges were filed within a week of Thanksgiving. Marcus, Sarah, and David were all arrested for elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder. Dr. Hoffman was arrested too. Turns out Jake's evidence uncovered an entire network of corrupt medical professionals helping families institutionalize elderly relatives for money. Marcus lost his job when his law firm found out about the charges. Sarah's ex-husband got full custody of their children when the court learned about her attempt to murder their grandmother. David's tech startup investors pulled out when news of the scandal hit social media. But here's the beautiful part. They all hired expensive lawyers to fight the charges, using the money they've been counting on inheriting from me. Money that was no longer coming their way. The will reading was held in February, with all the family, friends, and extended relatives present. When Elizabeth played my video message explaining exactly why each child was receiving $1, there wasn't a dry eye in the room, except theirs. They were too stunned to cry. I used that video to tell the whole story. How they drugged me, forged my signature, planned my death, and celebrated the idea of my early demise. I included audio recordings of their most damning conversations. By the time the video ended, even their former allies in the family had turned against them. The $3.5 million I'd accumulated through decades of hard work and careful saving went to those 3 charities I'd chosen. The American Cancer Society sent me a beautiful letter thanking me for the donation and telling me how many research grants it would fund. The National Center on Elder Abuse named a program after me, the Helena Morrison Initiative for Elder Protection. But the local legal aid charity did something even more special. They created a fund specifically to help elderly victims of family fraud, providing free legal services and private investigators to seniors who suspect their relatives are trying to take advantage of them. My grandchildren, 4 of them have stayed in close contact with me. Emma, Marcus's daughter, actually moved in with me for her last semester of college. She said she wanted to learn from a woman who knows how to stand up for herself. She's studying law now, planning to specialize in elder rights. The younger grandchildren visit every few weeks, usually brought by their mothers who divorced my sons. Turns out that attempting to murder your mother-in-law is grounds for divorce in most states. Who knew? As for my children, they're all serving reduced sentences after plea agreements. Marcus got 2 years. Sarah got 18 months. David got the lightest sentence, 1 year, because he testified against Dr. Hoffman and helped uncover the broader fraud network. I haven't spoken to any of them since that Thanksgiving dinner. I sent each of them a letter while they were in prison, though I told them that if they ever genuinely wanted to make amends, not for money, but for real forgiveness, I might consider rebuilding some kind of relationship. Only David has responded. He wrote me a letter that took 6 pages to apologize and explain how the greed consumed him. He asked for nothing except the chance to prove he could be a better person. We'll see. But me? I'm living the life I never knew I wanted. I sold the house. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Those rooms held too many memories of people who betrayed me. I bought a small condo near the beach and used the rest of the money to travel. I've been to 12 countries in 6 months. I've taken cooking classes in France, learned pottery in Greece, and studied photography in Japan. Next month, I'm going to Egypt to see the pyramids, something Thomas and I always plan to do someday. If you like my story, you can support me by making a donation so I can write more stories. Thank you in advance. For more life stories like this, like the video and subscribe to my channel. There are many other stories waiting for you. I learned something important through all of this. It's never too late to stand up for yourself. It's never too late to demand respect. And it's never too late to start a new chapter of your life. My children thought they were waiting for me to die, so their lives could begin. Instead, I had to let them go so my real life could finally start. I'm 71 years old now, and I've never felt more alive. The end. This has been a Phoenix Faye story. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful revenge is simply living well and refusing to let others dim your light.